The Vanishing House. My uncle had a story that he only shared once, around a campfire one Halloween night. He didn't believe in ghost stories, and he rarely joked about anything supernatural. But on that particular night, with his voice low and his eyes shadowed by the firelight, he told us about the Vanishing House. This story didn't happen to a friend of a friend. It happened to him. He insisted, his voice trembling slightly with every word. He was 24 at the time, a man eager for life and new places, with no qualms about exploring the hidden corners of his hometown. His friends called him the Trailblazer, and he wore the nickname like a badge of honor. One evening, he heard about an old house just outside of town. It wasn't on any map and wasn't visible from any main roads, but everyone had heard about it in one way or another. Locals whispered that it only appeared on certain nights. A strange two-story mansion nestled deep in the woods, with walls as white as bone and windows as dark as a void. Those who went looking for it rarely found it, but those who did never returned the same. The house was called Willow's End. The next Friday night, his curiosity got the better of him. He packed a flashlight, a bottle of water, and a few snacks, then drove his truck as far as he could down an overgrown dirt path. With only his flashlight to guide him, he trekked deeper into the woods. The air was thick, cold, and still, as if the entire forest held its breath. For nearly an hour, he walked without seeing anything but trees and shadows. And just when he was about to turn back, he saw it. The house stood in a clearing, untouched by time. Its walls gleamed eerily in the moonlight, a pristine white that seemed unnatural, almost glowing. It was beautiful in a way, but there was a darkness that clung to it, a feeling that twisted his stomach and made him second-guess every step he took toward it. He told himself it was just an old house, abandoned and left to rot like so many others. But in the back of his mind, something whispered that he shouldn't be there. Ignoring the nagging fear, he stepped up to the front door, finding it slightly ajar. He pushed it open, and it creaked like a dying breath, echoing through the empty hallways. Inside, everything was immaculate. The floors were polished, the walls were clean, and the air was heavy with a faint scent of lavender, like someone had just stepped out moments before. He called out, "Hello," but his voice was swallowed by the silence. Exploring the first floor, he found a grand staircase, a parlor filled with antique furniture, and a dining room set for a meal that had never been served. The table was laden with dishes, silverware, and crystal goblets, all arranged as if awaiting guests. He walked around the table, running his fingers along the cold surface, feeling an inexplicable sense of dread settle over him. Then he heard it, a faint rustling from upstairs. His heart pounded as he turned toward the staircase. Against his better judgment, he climbed the steps, each one creaking beneath his weight, the sound magnified in the stillness. At the top, he found himself in a long hallway lined with doors. They all looked the same, with polished brass handles and wood that gleamed in the dim light. Slowly, he turned the handle of the nearest one, pushing it open to reveal a bedroom bathed in moonlight. The bed was neatly made, with a heavy quilt pulled up to the pillows, and on the nightstand sat a single book. Curiosity piqued, he picked up the book and opened it. Inside were names, lists and lists of names, each one neatly handwritten in delicate cursive. Some names had dates beside them, while others were left blank. He flipped through the pages, finding hundreds of names, each one sending a shiver down his spine. Then he saw his own name. He dropped the book, his breath caught in his throat as he stumbled back from the bed. He couldn't explain it, didn't understand it. His name, written in that careful script, with today's date scrawled beside it. Fear surged through him, and he turned to leave. The hallway was different when he stepped back out. The doors were closer together. The walls seemed narrower, pressing in on him. Panic rose as he ran down the hall, trying every door, only to find them locked. He kept moving, feeling as if the walls were closing in, suffocating him. Finally, he reached the staircase, but when he looked down, the ground floor was gone. Instead, it seemed to stretch downward into a dark, twisting abyss. There were no stairs, just an endless drop, and he could hear faint whispers rising from below, voices that murmured his name over and over. Turning, he bolted back into the hallway, desperate to find a way out. But the house seemed to shift around him, the walls warping, bending, each room becoming a maze of corridors and doors that led nowhere. The air grew colder, the whispers louder, filling his ears, wrapping around him like a noose. Then he saw her. Standing at the end of the hall was a woman, dressed in an old-fashioned gown, her face hidden in shadows. She didn't move, didn't speak, but he could feel her gaze piercing through him, cold and unforgiving. Her hand slowly lifted, pointing toward him, and the whispers grew into a roar, screaming his name with a fury that shook the walls. Paralyzed with fear, he watched as she drifted closer, her feet not touching the ground. Her face came into view, and he saw the hollow sockets where her eyes should have been, empty and endless, like the void at the bottom of the staircase. Her mouth opened, and from it came a wail that pierced through him, a sound of pure agony that shook him to his core. He turned and ran, stumbling through the twisting hallways, the rooms blending together in a blur of darkness and cold. Every door led to another hallway. Every turn brought him face to face with dead ends, until he was hopelessly lost, trapped in a nightmare of endless corridors and locked doors. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had no meaning in that place. Exhausted and defeated, he collapsed against a wall, his breath shallow, his mind fractured. He could hear the whispers closing in, the walls seeming to breathe with the sound of his name, and he knew he would never leave. Days later, his truck was found abandoned at the edge of the woods, keys still in the ignition. There was no sign of him, no clue as to where he had gone. His friends searched for him. The town organized a search party, but he was never seen again. Months passed, and eventually the town moved on. But rumors persisted, tales of a ghostly house that appeared and disappeared in the woods. Some said it was the spirit of Willow's End, a house cursed to trap those who entered, feeding off their fear and despair. And then one day, his sister found a book left on her doorstep, an old leather-bound journal with pages filled with names. She flipped through it, her heart sinking as she reached the final page. There, written in neat cursive, was her brother's name.